President Trump is threatening to block the opening of a bridge connecting the U.S. and Canada. The Gordie Howe International Bridge, spanning the Detroit River and linking the Canadian province of Ontario with the U.S. state of Michigan, is nearly complete. It was expected to open to traffic early this year. President Trump writing on Truth Social, "I will not allow this bridge to open until the United States is fully compensated," adding, "We will start negotiations immediately." Here to break down what this all could mean is the Hill's White House columnist Niall Stanage. Hey, Niall. So this is a $4.7 billion project paid for by the Canadian government. President Trump says he won't allow it to open until the United States is fully compensated for everything we have given them being Canada. What does that mean, and does he have the power actually to block this project from moving forward?
So it's a bit of a head scratcher what exactly he means. He seems, I think, to be suggesting that the relationship between Canada and the United States is one where the US is in some generalized fashion generous to Canada. As you pointed out in your introduction, this is a project paid for by the Canadian side. So what we have given them in that specific sense is not really very clear at all. As to the second part of your question, Drew, about whether the president could block this, he couldn't block construction of the bridge, given that that is being paid for by the Canadians and will, I gather, soon be completed. What he could do, maybe, is block the actual border crossing once it's open and functional. He would apparently need to declare an emergency to do that. It's not really clear what the basis for that emergency would be, but that could be one potential route he could take.
I imagine a legal battle would ensue if that is the case. The president has made threats before against Canada and then ended up backing off. The president does say he wants to negotiate. What should we be watching for in the coming days and weeks?
I think really the broad relationship between the US and Canada is unsettled to a much greater degree than it has been up until the recent past. We'll get into that perhaps in a second, but overall, there just seems to be this belief on President Trump's part that the Canadians are, I don't know exactly, being ungrateful in some sense. Canada obviously takes the view that it's an important trading relationship with the US, but it doesn't want to be just a whipping boy for President Trump. So that's the kind of broad picture. There are some specific elements within that trading relationship regarding tariffs that Canada puts on US goods and, of course, vice versa.
Could this be another example of President Trump pursuing personal grievances to the detriment of his political party? I mean, Republicans are trying to win a Senate seat in Michigan. If I'm Republican candidate Mike Rogers, probably not the news I wanted to wake up to.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, and we have the Democrats already making that point, including in Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin and others, arguing that, look, a bridge between the United States and Canada is, by its very nature, something that enhances trade, and from that trade, both sides stand to benefit. I mean, that's the whole point of the thing. So if this were blocked, or if it were to become the focal point of a real crisis, I think in Michigan that could be a political problem for the Republicans if this bridge is set to deliver benefits and it's President Trump who stands in its way.
The metaphor here seems to kind of write itself. President Trump is trying to block a literal bridge between the U.S. and Canada. What does this say about the relationship between the two countries?
It does say that the relationship is very tense. It's only relatively recently that the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, delivered a speech at Davos that was pretty clearly aimed at Trump specifically. Carney was making the argument that other, what he called middle powers, including Canada, had to think more about other kinds of relationships if the United States was not to be the kind of reliable partner that they had previously been accustomed to. And subsequent to that, there was not really a trade deal, but negotiations between China and Canada, which irked Trump a lot. So all of these different factors, many of them around the issue of trade, are really roiling the waters between these two nations. And I think we're likely to see that continue, particularly as this latest controversy winds its way forward.
And President Trump took issue with that speech by Carney at the World Economic Forum. Makes you wonder why this is coming up now. But we'll leave that question to another day and wrap this up. Always appreciate your insight. Niall Stanage, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.